Left with the last part of the lesson. Heading koriba. Yeah, please come. Okay. Prior to this, what we have explained is, since the chapter itself is about sexual reproduction, so we have talked about the different sexual parts of a plant, the male part, the female part, what is the process of formation of the male gametes, the process of formation of the female gametes, the point that is called as pollination, the discussion about fertilization and post-fertilization events. This is something that we have covered in our previous classes. So, apomixes and polyembryony, just a few points to be remembered. First, let's talk about apomixes and polyembryony. Okay, talking about this, apomixes, if you don't have any idea, it's okay, but polyembryony, by the word itself, I think we can have an idea. Polyembryony means what? More than one embryos is something that's called as polyembryony. So, what we'll be talking about is, what is the reason for formation of more than one embryo? You don't have to talk about it in a great detailed. Okay, common ketaman point, and polyembryony generally 2 or 3 questions is asked. First, who has given the term? Second, I think you all have heard something called as advantative polyembryony. Okay, we'll be discussing, and some examples of plants which shows polyembryony. Hegita janile hogo, nothing much in details. Okay, let's discuss with apomixes first. What is apomixes? Apomixes is a type of asexual reproduction. Right? So, apomixes ki hoy? Asexual reproduction. It is a process in which the plants reproduces asexually, but seeds are produced. Right? That is the basic difference between sexual. Whenever we talk about sexual and asexual reproduction, we understand that sexual reproduction always give rise to what? Seeds, especially in case of higher plants, right? When we are talking about spermatophytes, sexual reproduction hole ki hobo? Seed formation hobo. You know, apomixes is a process of ki? Asexual reproduction, but the interesting point is the seeds would be formed. If seeds has to be formed, then what is the structure or what is the cell that we are concerned with? We are concerned with the embryo. Embryo form koribo lagibo, tetiahe seed form koribo, right? Next, as far as asexual reproduction is concerned, we know all the offsprings of asexual reproduction look exactly the same as their parents, right? So, we could be using a term that is called as clones, yes or no? Right? Asexual reproduction is jimanbor offsprings hoy, gutebor eke dekha aru tak ami ki boli kau? Clones. Each member of these clones are called as ramete, hetu moi word di dim, R-A-M-E-T. Right. So, asexual reproduction ki, apomixes ki hoy? It is a process of asexual reproduction. That interesting point ki, seeds are formed. Next, offsprings are said to be clones, and out of the clones, each member is called as a ramete. The next point of discussion is, if the embryo is not formed from the zygote, tetiahle embryo to cobra form kore. We said seed formation is seen. If seed formation is seen, then obviously embryo is formed. Normally, when we talk about sexual reproduction, embryo kune form kore? Who forms the embryo? Obviously the zygote, right? And if you talk about the zygote, zygote is the fusion of 2 gametes, the male gamete and the female gamete, fused together will form the zygote. The zygote would divide and redivide and would form the embryo, and ultimately from the embryo what we will see is the seed formation. From the seed we will see the baby plant. Hetu hekintu ami janu, right? Yate ki hobo? Embryo formation dekha pam, right? Seed formation dekha pam, kintu the zygote does not form the embryo. If the zygote does not form the embryo, who acts as a zygote? Someone needs to act as a zygote to develop the baby plant, right? So, who acts as a zygote? So, there are various different types of cells who might act as a zygote, and whenever we talk about a zygote, what is the ploidy of a zygote? Twice in. So, some cell of the parent body would act itself as a embryo, and ultimately from that cell itself the baby plant would be formed. Normally ki hoy je zygote form kore by fusion, gametes thakibo, gametes fuse koribo, fuse kori pelai zygote form koribo, zygote would form the embryo and ultimately the seed. Yate ki hobo? Fusion nai, male gamete female gamete or kotha nai, right? No fusion, no zygote formation, but embryo would be formed. Cobra embryo form kore, depending on that we have different types of apomixes, right? So, we will be talking about it. Likhasun. The term apomixes was given by So what is apomixes? Apomixes is a type of asexual reproduction. Because of apomixes, what is produced? The offsprings are called as clones. Each member of the clone is called as ramid. What is unique about this process? No doubt it's a method of asexual reproduction, but seeds are produced, and seeds are produced without fertilization, right? Next is most commonly seen, question ahe. Generally whenever we talk about apomixes, grasses and asteraceae, these are the two things that you have to remember. Tar upor aru eku questions aha nai. Is this over? Ekini hol? And since we are talking about asexual reproduction, so obviously the reproduction process would be faster or slower? Would be faster as compared to the sexual method of reproduction. Next we have to talk about types of apomixes. Heading kora, types of apomixes. Type of apomixes, two types, agamospermy and vegetative propagation. Generally in case of angiosperms, if you talk about types of apomixes, not only in angiosperms, if you talk about types of apomixes, broadly divided into agamospermy and vegetative propagation. Out of these two, vegetative propagation is something that we have already discussed, right? What we understand by the word vegetative propagation? Vegetative parts of a plant giving rise to a new plant is called as vegetative propagation. And whenever we talk about vegetative part of a plant, which parts are we talking about? Stems, roots, leaves, etc. Everything except the flower are considered as what? Vegetative parts. So whenever we talk about vegetative propagation, we have already talked about something called as natural vegetative propagation aru artificial vegetative propagation. Natural vegetative propagation of what we have talked about is remember these terms we have discussed in morphology, right? As far as artificial is concerned, artificial of ki pore some process like clear? Cutting, layering, grafting, micropropagation. Micropropagation mane we are talking about tissue culture, right? So ekhini bostu artificial vegetative, natural vegetative here. Then stems also we have talked about stems of modification poriso, no? Underground stem, aerial stem, subaerial stem, etc., right? So this is the morphology part we have done. This is from that first chapter, that is reproduction in organisms. Second year of first lesson 2, no? Reproduction in organisms, we have all this. Have we discussed that chapter? No? Okay. When we will discuss that chapter, these are the things that we are going to discuss, right? As of now, we are not going to go in details about this. We are going to write something about agamospermy. If this is over, agamospermy heading kora. হ'ল নেকি এইটো নাই হোৱা হ'ল So what is agamospermy? It is nothing but apomixes. If you are talking about apomixes, so obviously seeds would be produced, but seeds would not be produced because of gametic fusion, right? Zygote formation nokore, kintu embryo directly form koribo. Depending on who forms or acts as an embryo, we have different types of agamospermy. Agamospermy is something that's seen not only in case of angiosperms, but also in certain types of lower plants also. In case of pteridophytes also, we see a particular type of agamospermy, because pteridophytes is also included under key seed bearing plants, right? Our apomixes by agamospermid ki hoy, seeds formation hoy. So when we talk about seed formation, any plant that is capable of producing a seed or spermatophyte would always be included. And spermatophyte boli kole, obviously pteridophytes is included, right? Hold. Is it over? Nikhil. Actually talking about seed formation, no? Seed buli kole we are concerned mainly with gymnosperms and angiosperms. If you talk about seed bearing plants, generally pteridophytes included and not included. It's not included, no? Basically it's only gymnosperms and angiosperms. We know that closed naked seed and closed seed, no? Why we are talking about pteridophytes? Because if you remember, we have discussed something called as the starting of the seed habit, right? In certain plants we have seen the starting of the seed habit. Example, Selaginella, right? We have talked about that before. But spermatophyte buli kole, it is only the gymnosperms and the angiosperms that is included, right? Can I rub this part? Okay, the next part is depending on who forms the embryo, we have different types. So heikini bostu likhim. It will be a chart form, okay? A chart form ke likhibo para, or you can write individually also, doesn't matter. We'll have 4 sections. who forms the embryo? Depending on that, we have different types of egamospermy. So the first type of egamospermy is adventative embryony. If it is adventative, তেতিয়াহ'লে embryo to কোনে form কৰে, right? Instead of giving this first, what I have done is embryo কোনে form কৰিছে হেখন chart দিছো, right? Where is the party? Here. What is it? Oporot. Nice, no? Early morning. কেতিয়াবা অশান্তি লাগি যায়, no? My God. What is the party for? New COVID rules. নেকি? বিৰাট ফুটি পাইছে নেকি? Another music. First complete this and we'll go for the last one. Areta, Saita type. Saita type buli kole, generally if you're talking about angiosperms, it's 3 types. And if you're going to start, consider some other plant, then it's of 4 types. Okay, so what we were discussing is the formation of the embryo. Who forms the embryo? Not the zygote but someone else. Depending on who forms the embryo or which one acts as the embryo, we have different types of embryony or we have different types of egamospermy. From these, whatever we have written, maximum question has been asked from this. So you need to know the word sporophytic budding. It will put question ahe. Whenever you hear the word sporophytic budding, okay, sporophyte we understand. Sporophyte buli kwa loge lage, what would be the ploidy of the cell? Obviously twice in, right? Sporophytic budding. Budding means what? It's a process to which from one cell the different cells grows up, right? In the form of a bud. So we have a process that is called as sporophytic budding. Who acts as the sporophyte or who acts as the main cell who would form the embryo is the Nucellus and integument. So maximum question has been asked about these words. Remember the words nucellus, integument, sporophytic, budding, and the examples. From all the examples that we are going to write, it's only these 3 examples that had been asked mostly, right? Baki ebilak as far as recurrent, non-recurrent, iman questions aha nai, right? So apomixes boli kole, we generally remember sporophytic budding. If it is sporophytic budding, sporophyte will behave as an embryo. Which sporophytic cell are you talking about it in precise? It is the nucellus and the integuments. Nucellus, integuments, I think you remember, right? Nucellus of KSL, it is that cell who will form the ovule, no? So what is the ploidy of the nucellus? Twice n. What is the ploidy of the ovule? N. No? It's the first one over. First two over, no? So important is this part. Again, example not needed, term to janibo lagibo. Parthenogenesis is without fertilization. Okay. In case of plants or in case of animals, parthenogenesis, parthenocarpy. At animals, oh. Or at a whole the process that's seen in case of animals, right? Right. As I said, apomixes, it's generally the first one that we have discussed, that's important. So the words again, if you are talking about nucellar embryo, so we understand the nucellar embryo kune form korise, nucellus form korise. That process is called as ki sporophytic budding. So the question could be asked as nucellar embryo develops from, right? Or sporophytic budding develops dash type of embryo. So hekita word ami poribo lagibo. Baki kita recurrent, non-recurrent to iman questions aha nai. These are not normal process, no. These are not normal process. Kiman extraordinary, kisman exceptions. So if you are talking about, especially if you are talking about pteridophytes, sahantar to normal type of sexual reproduction hu ase. Nahi jano. Tar upor kisman exceptional rules also we see. So gametophyte hobo. Oh, how hobo? Gametophyte hobo. গেমেটোফাইট হ'ব ৰাইট সো সেই এক্সেপশ্যন কাৰণেতো আমি পঢ়ি আছোঁ বস্তুটো নৰ্মেল কেছততো তেনেকুৱা নহয় So as far as the note is concerned, this is the note that we have to talk about in apomixes, but the points to be remembered is what is apomixes, a type of asexual reproduction, what is unique, seeds are produced without fusion of gametes. Third, clones are produced as a result, and these clones, each of the clone is called as a remit, right. Depending on who forms the embryo, we have different types of agamospermy, right. Vegetative propagation we understand, agamospermy, what is important from this section is nucellar or sporophytic budding. Yatke beshi aru nalage. If this is over, polyembryony heading koriba. অলপ আগতে চাৰ্টখনত যেটো আমি এমব্ৰায়ো লিখিছিলো ন এমব্ৰায়ো চাৰিটা পাৰ্টৰ পৰা দিছিলো নাম্বাৰ 2 চোৱাচোন ফ্ৰম মেগাস্পোৰ মাদাৰ সেল আছে ৰাইট তাৰ সাইডত লিখি থৈ দিয়াচোন ডিপ্লোস্পোৰি নাম্বাৰ 2 embryo formed from what megaspore mother cell sidot ki likhi thoi diba diplospore the process is also called as this okay okay likhi lo right? Polyembryony means more than one embryo, right? More than one embryo may be the result of more than one egg, or it would be the result of more than one embryo sac. Duta reason, no? Polyembryony mane ki? You have more than one embryo. Normally, if you are talking about sexual reproduction, embryo keta form kore? Eta, right? N into N will give you the zygote. Zygote will form one embryo will form the seed, and ultimately it will form the baby plant. But sometimes we see more than one embryo inside the seed. That is what is called as polyembryony. A to be that important, live and hook are citrus. AR per question ahe. So it may be more than one cell in the embryo sac, which is the thing that we are talking about. Remember this structure? Right? We have talked about this. Etu ki hoy? Embryo sac. Right? Embryo sac or egg kiman asile. Normal cases that we have talked about the structure, it's only one egg. Sometimes what happens, more than one egg might be present in the embryo sac. If it's more than one egg, then what will happen? Male gametes will fuse with all the eggs that are present in the ovule. Aru jetia egg or logot fuse kore, jetia zygote form koribo. Zygote form korile to embryo form hobo. Is the process understood? So that could be one reason. Second reason is there could be more than one embryo sac in the ovule. Talking about the ovule, no? Right? Yate ki asile? Nucellus. Right? Nucellus or cells bilake. If you are talking about this as the entire nucellus, no? Nucellus or gute cells bilakor eta cell enlarge hoi pelai ki form korisile? Embryo sac. Right? Ketiaba ki hoy duta cell enlarge hobo pare, ketiaba tinta cell enlarge hobo pare. So because of these two reasons, either this reason or either this reason, we see a process that is called as polyembryony. Right? So ovule to bhitor beleg embryo sac thakibo pare, beleg jodi embryo sac thake, yato egg ki thakibo? Egg, yato egg thakibo, yato egg thakibo, etu eta ba etu eta. Right? Embryo jiman form koribo himan seed form koribo, jiman seed form koribo himan baby plant form koribo. Right? Simple polyembryony or adventative polyembryony. Whenever we hear the word adventative, we have to remember sporophytic. If you talk about sporophytic, we have to remember nucellus and integuments, right? So embryo kune form korise? জাইগোটেটো ফৰ্ম কৰিছে তাৰ উপৰিও ইন্টিগুমেন্টছেও ফৰ্ম কৰিব পাৰে নিউচেলাছেও ফৰ্ম কৰিব পাৰে ওকে নাও ডোন্ট গেট কনফিউজ বিটুইন এপোমিক্সেছ এণ্ড পলিএমব্ৰায়নি এপোমিক্সেছ ইজ আ টাইপ অফ asexual reproduction polyembryony is a type of sexual reproduction okay so in that case polyembryony obviously the normal zygote formation would be seen right observe hetu dekhai pam so normal zygote to ki form korbo normal embryo eta form korbo the process that we have been reading so far right apart from that process if other cells are also involved in embryo formation or they will start developing directly as an embryo that type would be called as adventative polyembryony so sometimes what happens the nucellar cells or the integuments obviously they are what they are twice in if you are talking about embryo is also twice in so integuments of to baby plant form koribo that would also be a sporophyte and if you are talking about nucellus also that plant would also be a sporophyte and the original plant that is formed from the zygote that would also be twice in right ki bostu integuments twice in hoy kyo twice etu covering hai again from this part these examples important polyembryony kole it's citrus opuntia and mangifera egita uporte question ahe liven hook question ahe aru eku question e nahe right ha ekon thakile eko huna na pao okay if this is over some other types of polyembryony is also seen mainly it is simple and adventative ha kopra yapra egita question to ahe MCQ saba polyembryony section of jodi question die ei dutai question libo Leeuwenhoek in citrus aru examples aru adventative and sporophytic budding nucellus and integuments ei sarita points bas eitu part hoise no process is called as budding mane we are not that talking about that budding in case of this one asexual reproduction or budding to kotha kintu process to ki eta cell or pura eko meiosis nuhua ke jodi directly form korise eta cell or pura antu cell form korise ta mane ami bud formation boli kom exception. Normally male gamete to ahi pelai. So synergid is also N, antipodal is also N, egg is also N. হয় ন গোটেইকেইটা N haploid কিছুমান থাকিব কেতিয়াবা কি হয় synergid to degenerate নকৰি পেলাই তাৰ নিউক্লিয়াছ pollen I mean male gamete nucleus লগত fuse কৰি twice N perform কৰি দিয়ে right exceptions ulnus ULNUS cleavage polyembryony উপৰত কেতিয়াবা question আহে what is cleavage the process of splitting is called as এটা embryo থাকিব main embryo form কৰিব তাৰ পৰা টুকুৰা টুকুৰি হৈ পেলাই আৰু embryos form কৰিব that is what is called as cleavage right next we have two types of polyembryony true and false I did not write it in sentence I think it's understood এটা ovule ভিতৰত এটা embryo sac ভিতৰত বহুত embryo if that is the process that is called as true you have one ovule inside that ovule you have many embryo sacs that is what is called as false কোনটো ইয়াৰে orchids nymphia nicotiana বহুত embryo এটা seedot এটা ovulot বা এটা embryo sac ভিতৰত বহুত embryo এটা embryo sac ভিতৰত তো many embryos আছে ন embryo sac ভিতৰৰ portionটোক আমি embryo বুলি কওঁ আৰু embryo to be precise embryo sac ভিতৰত egg to fertilize কৰাৰ পিছত zygote form কৰাৰ পিছত তাক আমি embryo কওঁ ঠিক আছে সো এটা যদি তোমাৰ নরমাল embryo sac আছিলে embryo sac তোমাৰ egg আছিলে egg আছিলে synergid আছিলে নরমালি ইয়াতে fertilize কৰি প্লাই এটা জাইগোট এটা embryo কেতিয়াবা কি হয় এবিলাকটো ফার্টিলাইজ হৈ যাব পাৰে যদি ফার্টিলাইজ হৈ যায় ইয়াতে তিনটা জাইগোট ফর্ম কৰিব নকৰে তো তিনটা জাইগোট ফর্ম কৰিলে তিনটা embryo ফর্ম কৰিব নকৰে হ্যাঁ বহুত কেইটা embryo ফর্ম কৰিব এটা embryo sac ভিতৰত many embryos থাকিব ঠিক আছে many embryos মানে ultimately এইটো process জি বুজাল এটা embryo sac ভিতৰত এগেও এটুৱেও কৰিব twice n এটুৱেও কৰিব twice n এটুৱে কৰিব twice n এটা সিঙ্গল সেল নহয় জানো সিঙ্গল সেলে মাল্টিপ্লাই কৰি বহুত সেলস ফর্ম কৰিব নকৰে এইটোৱে কৰিলে এইটোৱেও আকৌ মাল্টিপ্লাই কৰি বহুত সেলস কৰিলে নাই এটোও ঠিক তেনেকে প্ৰসেসটো বহুত ফর্ম কৰিলে এই কালেকশনটো কি বুলি কম embryo এটো কি তে এটা embryo sac ভিতৰত যদি বহুত কিটা embryo ফর্ম কৰে that process is called as true embryony or true polyembryony हाँ क्या कैसा होगा cleavage polyembryony you have the main embryo that is formed by the process of this is not cleavage because this is something that's forming entirely independently right. Cleavage would be the normal embryo that will be formed, and that embryo will split into smaller parts, and each part will behave or will give rise to a baby plant. That would be a cleavage. But this is not cleavage, this is the entire formation, new formation, right. So, this is all about apomixis and polyembryony. Right. So, ultimately we have completed this chapter, sexual reproduction in flowering plants. If you have any doubts, ask me, or else we can wind up the class.